The Lightkeeper's promise. On the edge of a small, rugged coastal village, where the cliffs met the endless expanse of the sea, there stood a lighthouse. Its tall, white tower stretched toward the sky like a guardian, ever vigilant, its light sweeping across the waters every night. The villagers spoke little of the lighthouse except when they needed its guiding light on stormy evenings or when ships were lost in the mist. The man who tended to the lighthouse was Elias, a quiet, solitary figure who had taken up the job when he was just a young boy, many years ago. Elias had grown up with the sea. His father, the original Lightkeeper, had often taken him down to the rocks as a child, teaching him the language of the waves, the winds, and the sky. They would sit by the shore, watching the boats as they sailed in, their sails full of promise. And Elias's father would say, "The lighthouse doesn't just light the way for the ships, son, it holds the souls of those who need to be found again." But that was before the storm. On a day like any other, a fierce storm had descended on the coast. Waves crashed against the cliffs, and the wind howled through the trees. Elias's father had been at the lighthouse, as always, but the storm had been too strong. The sea, which had always been his ally, took him without warning. The village searched for days, but there was no trace. Only the lighthouse remained, a cold, silent sentinel in the storm's wake. Elias, now alone, had inherited the lighthouse. It became his life, his purpose. He promised his father that he would always keep the light burning, no matter what. For years, he kept the promise, working in solitude, his heart heavy with the memories of the father he had lost. He maintained the lighthouse with the same dedication his father had shown, but it was more than a duty, it was a way to keep his father's spirit alive. Each night, as the beam of light swept across the waters, Elias would say a quiet prayer, asking his father for guidance, for strength, and most of all, for forgiveness for not being able to save him. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, a storm began to roll in from the sea. Elias could feel it in the air, the weight of the coming winds, the murmur of the waves growing restless. He hurried to the lighthouse, the familiar sound of the wind pushing against his back. The waves were already crashing violently against the rocks as the storm picked up speed. He knew this storm was going to be fierce, and he could already see the faint outline of a ship in the distance, struggling against the current. With trembling hands, Elias rushed to the top of the tower, pulling the lever to turn on the beacon. The lighthouse beam pierced the darkening sky, cutting through the fog and waves. He rang the bell, the deep sound echoing across the ocean, hoping the ship could see it in time. Hours passed, and the storm worsened. Elias stayed at the lighthouse, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that this storm was different, that someone needed him more than ever. His thoughts drifted back to his father. What would he do in this moment? Would he have been able to save whoever was out there? Just as Elias was about to lose hope, the lighthouse's beam caught something small, moving against the waves. A tiny boat, battered by the storm, struggling to stay afloat. It was so close to the rocks, so close to being lost forever. Without a second thought, Elias pulled on his coat, grabbing a rope and lantern, and rushed down the spiral staircase of the lighthouse. He ran to the shore, his feet sinking into the wet sand, and shouted into the wind, "Hold on, I'm coming." The boat was tossed by the waves, but Elias, with the help of the lantern's light, guided it toward the shore. Finally, he reached it. The boat slammed into the rocks, and Elias rushed forward to pull the sailor out of the water. But it wasn't a sailor, it was a young woman, soaked to the bone, her hair wild and tangled, her eyes wide with fear. She was barely conscious, clutching a bundle of seaweed and shells tightly in her arms as if they were the only things keeping her alive. Elias carried her to the lighthouse, the storm raging around them. Inside, he laid her by the fire, wrapped her in blankets, and gave her warm tea. She was shivering, her teeth chattering, but she looked at him with grateful eyes. "I thought I was lost," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I was searching for something, but I didn't know what. The storm ... it swept me away." Elias sat down beside her, studying her face. There was something about her that seemed so familiar, yet he could not place it. "The sea has a way of finding people when they've lost their way," he said softly. "But sometimes, the storm is the only way to bring you home." She nodded slowly, closing her eyes, but Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this was not just a random meeting, it felt like destiny. The storm raged on through the night, but by morning, the sea had calmed. The young woman, whose name was Lily, had recovered enough to sit up and tell Elias her story. She had come from a distant island, a place far beyond the horizon, in search of something. She wasn't sure what it was, something buried deep inside her, a feeling she couldn't explain, but she had known it was time to leave, and so, with nothing but a small boat and her hopes, she had set sail. "I thought maybe the sea would show me the way," Lily explained. "But instead, it almost took me away." Elias, hearing her words, felt a spark of understanding. He had been lost, too. Once lost in grief, lost in a promise he couldn't keep. But perhaps, just as the sea had brought Lily to him, it had brought him to her as well. I think I understand," Elias said, looking out at the horizon where the sun was now rising. The light was breaking through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the sea. The sea is not just about what you find, it's about what you leave behind and what you bring with you. Lily smiled, and for the first time in years, Elias felt the weight of the past lift from his shoulders. He no longer felt the need to carry his father's promise alone. The lighthouse, once a symbol of loss, had become a place of hope again. From that day on, Elias and Lily worked together, tending to the lighthouse. She helped him with the light, making sure it burned bright, and together, they shared stories of their lives, of their dreams, of the sea. As the years passed, they became inseparable, two souls bound by the ocean's eternal rhythm. Elias no longer lived in the shadow of his father's memory. Instead, he saw the lighthouse as a place where lives were brought together, where the sea could show its true nature not just as a force of destruction, but as a force of healing. And every night, when the light swept across the waters, he knew that it wasn't just the ships that needed guidance, it was the people who sailed them, the ones searching for their way back home. And so, the lighthouse continued to shine, brighter than ever, a beacon of hope and love, guiding those lost at sea back to where they belong. The story of Elias and Lily is a powerful reminder that even in the midst of profound loss and hardship, the light of hope can always find its way through the darkness. Elias's journey is one of grief, isolation, and a sense of being lost. After losing his father to the sea, he feels compelled to carry on his father's legacy by tending to the lighthouse. However, for many years, the lighthouse becomes more than just a physical structure. It becomes a symbol of his unresolved pain, of promises made that seem impossible to fulfill. This moral speaks to the idea that sometimes our past, filled with losses and unhealed wounds, can feel like a storm that we can never escape from. We might carry the weight of those memories and promises for years, believing that we need to shoulder them alone or that they define us. But like the lighthouse, which in the beginning is a reminder of loss, there is the potential for transformation. The lighthouse, once a place of sorrow for Elias, becomes a place of renewal and connection once Lily arrives. Her presence helps him see that even in the darkest times, there is a way forward, not just by continuing the work his father started, but by finding a new sense of purpose. The arrival of Lily symbolizes how unexpected encounters, personal growth, and new perspectives can bring light back into our lives. While Elias's initial promise to his father felt like an obligation, through his connection with Lily, he learns that the lighthouse's true power lies not in the fulfillment of duty, but in its ability to guide others just as it guided Lily to safety. It's a metaphor for the way people can help each other find their way when they're feeling lost. The story also reflects the idea that healing comes not through isolation or trying to live up to others' expectations, but through opening ourselves to others and sharing our journeys. Elias, once a man trapped by grief, finds solace in sharing his life with Lily, who, despite her own struggles, brings new hope into his world. The moral here is that we often don't have to go through life's trials alone. By connecting with others, whether through shared experiences or fresh perspectives, we can not only heal but rediscover joy, a purpose, and love. Finally, the moral underscores the concept that sometimes what we're searching for isn't a destination, but the journey itself. Just as Lily embarked on her voyage without fully knowing what she was seeking, the characters in the story find that the most important part of their quest is the relationships and lessons they find along the way. It's not always about reaching a particular goal or outcome, but about the growth and understanding we experience during the process. In essence, this story teaches us that hope is not just about holding on to what we've lost, but about being open to what can be found when we least expect it. Life is full of storms, but it's through these storms, whether emotional, physical, or spiritual, that we often find the most meaningful connections and opportunities for healing. Even in the darkest moments of loss and grief, there is always hope and the possibility of healing. Just as the lighthouse guides ships through the storm, our hearts can guide us through difficult times, helping us rediscover purpose, connection, and the strength to move forward. Sometimes, the journey to find what we're looking for is less about the destination and more about the people we meet and the lessons we learn along the way. It's a reminder that even in our most challenging moments, help and understanding can come from unexpected places. And through these connections, we can find the light we need to move forward.